The person who knows the most about you is often the one who speaks the least. We generally assume that power is loud, that the person dominating the room, holding the spotlight, that's the one in control. But what if that's just a misdirection? In truly high-pressure dynamics, the most dangerous move isn't the one you see coming. Nope, it's the one that was planned and executed in total silence using information you freely gave away. So how does a person who says almost nothing end up with total leverage over your decisions? Well, this is the core paradox of the silent strategist. It's that exact moment your own need to be understood is used to build a map of your weaknesses. And what we're about to explore, it isn't just some interesting idea. It's a documented pattern of interaction, a cognitive shift that can turn a simple conversation into a full psychological audit. Look, this isn't about being an introvert or being shy. Not at all. This is about a deliberate strategy. It's a dynamic where one person's refusal to share any information creates this power imbalance so profound, it can steer your decisions without you even realizing you're being led. So we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to map out exactly how this silent leverage is built, step by step. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. The moment a conversation shifts, we're going to explore that critical transition from a normal, healthy interaction to something else entirely. The move from genuine connection to what you could call strategic reconnaissance. This is the precise point where a conversation stops being a two-way street and becomes a one-way extraction of data. This slide really breaks down that fundamental shift. On one side, you have what we all want, mutual disclosure. It's a two-way, peer-to-peer exchange where the goal is real connection. But on the other side, it morphs into analytical reconnaissance. And here, the goal isn't connection, it's intelligence gathering. It's no longer peer-to-peer. It's a subject-to-observer dynamic. And the second one person stops sharing, they basically turn the other person into what the source material chillingly calls a leaky data source. And that brings us to the formal name for this whole mechanism: passive data acquisition. This isn't just a theory, it's a documented behavioral pattern, and it thrives in environments where information is the main currency of power. Think about competitive corporate ladders, exclusive social circles, or even really high-stakes mentorships. In those arenas, listening isn't just about empathy, it's a strategic act of intelligence gathering. So, why are we so susceptible to this? Why do we fall for it? Well, it usually comes down to two really powerful belief patterns. First up is the confidant trap. Our brains are basically wired to trust people who listen to us. It just triggers a feeling of intimacy and care. But in this dynamic, that feeling is a trap, and it's designed to get you to share more and more. And that leads right into the second pattern, asymmetric vulnerability. You know that sinking feeling when you realize you've just laid out all your deepest fears and ambitions, and you know absolutely nothing about the person sitting across from you? That sudden sense of exposure, that imbalance, that's exactly where the leverage is born. So how is this map of your inner world actually drawn? This next part, this is where we reveal the playbook. We're shifting from the what to the how, breaking down the systematic, step-by-step method that a silent strategist can use to meticulously catalog your vulnerabilities. The whole process unfolds in three pretty distinct phases. It all starts with elicitation, which is just designed to get the data out of you. Then comes vulnerability mapping, and that's where all that data gets organized into a strategic blueprint. And finally, it all culminates in the surgical intervention, which is when that data is deployed for maximum impact at just the right moment. So let's break each of these down. Step one is elicitation, and its main tool is something called the information vacuum. Just think about those long, uncomfortable pauses in a conversation, right? Most of us feel this desperate, almost primal urge to fill that silence. Well, a silent strategist uses that against you. They'll use these minimal prompts, a simple "go on," or "that must have been difficult," and then they just wait. What's crazy is that individuals who've experienced this often report feeling incredibly heard in the moment. But in reality, they weren't being heard. They were being encouraged to empty their database just to relieve the psychological pressure of the silence. And all that raw data then moves into step two, vulnerability mapping. This is where your disclosures are systematically cataloged and indexed as actionable triggers. This slide illustrates it perfectly. You might confess, "I'm terrified of public failure." They don't just hear a fear, they log a leverage point, high visibility projects. You might mention, "I just want my boss to notice me." They see an opening for tailored praise or maybe strategic criticism. You admit you feel insecure about your experience, they note a specific pressure point. Your entire internal world, your fears, your hopes, it's all transformed into a list of buttons they can push whenever they want. And all of this leads to the final and most crucial step, this surgical intervention. The strategist holds on to this index data, sometimes for weeks, maybe even months, and they wait for just the right critical moment. Then, they deploy one specific piece of your own information to influence a key decision. Let's say they need you to drop a project. Instead of ordering you to, they might say something like, I'm worried this project has a bit too much public visibility, and given what you told me about your concerns with failure, maybe it's best to step back. Because it's rooted in your own confessed fears, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like uncanny insight. And this is the mechanism that ensures when they finally make their move, it feels almost impossible for you to say no. So we've seen the how of the playbook, but the really fascinating question is why. Why does our own brain so readily go along with this dynamic? This next section, we're going to dive deep into the psychology of control and the competing motivations that make this silent strategy so incredibly effective. This slide really gets to the heart of the psychological mismatch. The strategist's goal is something called predictive dominance. It means if they can map your reactive patterns, they can manage you with almost zero effort. Their ultimate goal is control. But on the other side, our vulnerability is a deep, fundamental human driver, the need for social attunement. We are biologically wired to want to feel seen and understood, and that very need is the open door through which this entire dynamic walks. And this brings us to a key psychological concept, affective reconnaissance. It basically refers to our biological tendency to seek validation from anyone who's observing us. When someone gives us their quiet, undivided attention, a deep part of our brain interprets that observation as a sign that we're important. And what do we do when we feel important? We start performing for our audience, trying to earn their approval. This biological reflex makes us incredibly vulnerable to those who simply watch and listen and wait. And this is the chilling psychological shift that happens inside our own minds. As the source material puts it so brilliantly, the target stops asking, "Who are they?" which is a question of curiosity and equality, and starts asking, "Do they like what they see?" A question that's rooted in validation and performance. The moment your focus shifts from understanding them to managing their perception of you, the power dynamic has completely and silently flipped. Okay, so after analyzing the mechanics of this pretty unsettling dynamic, the most important question is, how do you recognize it and reclaim your agency? This final section is all about empowerment. It's about shifting your role from being a passive data point in someone else's strategy to becoming the active editor of your own story. So the source material suggests a two-step framework for building awareness. And crucially, this isn't about confrontation, it's all about internal recognition and adjustment. The first step is to conduct a reciprocity audit. The second is to develop what's known as information sovereignty. A reciprocity audit is a simple but incredibly powerful mental check. After a conversation, just ask yourself, how much more do I know about them now versus how much more they know about me? Was information flowing both ways, or was it a one-way street? Now, the goal here isn't to get paranoid, but to consciously figure out if an interaction is a mutual relationship or a data gathering mission. It's really just about labeling the dynamic accurately for yourself. Once you recognize that lack of reciprocity, the next step is to practice information sovereignty. And this is the critical move. It means consciously resisting that powerful urge to fix their silence by sharing more about yourself. It means you have to sit with that uncomfortable silence and simply observe their refusal to share without taking the responsibility for it. This simple act of observation is what breaks the cycle of compulsive disclosure. And this brings us to a simple, practical, and incredibly effective rule to put into practice. When you are met with that long, strategic silence, your response should never be a confession just to fill the void. Your response should be a question. This simple act turns the focus right back onto them, and it interrupts the entire observational cycle before any real leverage can be built. Ultimately, what this entire dynamic reveals is a fundamental truth about self-awareness. The silent strategist pattern teaches us that our insecurities, our ambitions, our very thoughts, they can all be treated as a form of currency. Your mind is your own private territory. And awareness, just the simple ability to recognize these dynamics as they happen, is the single most important tool you have to make sure that you, and only you, hold the map. This entire cycle is only broken the moment you realize that your information is your own to give or to keep. You get to decide what goes into the final script and what stays on the cutting room floor. Because ultimately, in every interaction and every conversation, you are the editor of your own story.